Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. We just had a crazy second round of the NBA playoffs, and I'm going to be here to recap all of those series and give you guys a little bit of a preview to the conference finals. So first we're going to start with the series that ended the most recently, and that is the Denver Nuggets versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. There were quite a few blowouts in this series, but it was a very fun 7-game series. Minnesota started off the series taking games 1 and 2 in Denver, completely snatching home court advantage from the reigning champions. And the Timberwolves showed great things in those two games. In game 1, Anthony Edwards scored 43 points, they held off the Nuggets. And in game 2, the big story was the absolutely swarming defense on Jamal Murray. He was held to 3 of 18 shooting, and he was so frustrated he literally just started throwing stuff onto the court. But game 3, Denver came out a whole different team. Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray played well, but now more importantly they got help from everyone else on the team, with every starter scoring in double figures. In games 4 and 5, Nikola Jokic showed why he's the best player in the NBA and a 3-time MVP, especially in game 5 where he had 40 points, 13 assists, and 0 turnovers. Literally unreal. Now it looked like the Nuggets were the one that had this in the bag. But then the script flipped again. Game 6, Jamal Murray had another stinker, 4 of 18 shooting, and the Nuggets get blown out. And Game 7, the Nuggets home court, the script looked like it was going to flip one more time. The Nuggets were off to a 20-point lead, courtesy of a 24-point first half explosion by Jamal Murray, exercising his demons from this series, while Anthony Edwards only had 4 points in the first half. But then the 22-year-old superstar turned it up, and so did everyone on the Timberwolves. Mike Conley making the right plays, Jalen McDaniels with his 3-and-D play, and Cat not shrinking in the big moment. They'd come all the way back and knock off the defending champions on their home court. For the series, Anthony Edwards would average 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists on 50% shooting, and played great defense throughout the entire series. And speaking of great defense, like Anthony Edwards said, shout out to Jalen McDaniels. He made Jamal Murray miserable throughout most of this series. Jamal Murray only averaged 18 points and 4 assists on 40% shooting from the field and 33% shooting from 3. Nikola Jokic had some great games throughout the series, averaging 29 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists, but he just had to do everything this series. He had some games where he dominated Gobert, despite his damn good defense, because yes, Gobert did play good defense in this series, despite what the numbers might say, but Nikola Jokic just needed more help. Aaron Gordon had a good series overall, averaging 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, and a block, on 63% shooting from the field, but he was nowhere to be seen in the second half of Game 7. In fact, like I said, no one was. Only 5 points were not scored by Jokic or Murray in the entire second half of that game. The Denver Nuggets are going to have some decisions to make this offseason. KCP has a $15 million player option, which he may or may not accept, and he's a huge part of this team's success. This series also showed that Michael Porter Jr. is not the third option if this team wants to win multiple championships, especially on the max contract that he's on right now, making like $40 million. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, this really calms down the narratives that the Gobert trade was an all-time fleece. Obviously, we're going to have to await the results of the Western Conference Finals, but there's definitely a decent chance that they advance to the NBA Finals. They have a very well-constructed team with Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jalen McDaniels, Cat, and Gobert, as well as some good bench play from Naz Reid. They have figured out the defense, and they have guys who can score in bunches if left open, and that's a recipe for success for a deep playoff run. And now for the other series that ended on Sunday, the Knicks versus the Indiana Pacers. You can take my opinion here with a grain of salt if you want, as I am a Knicks fan, but I do think the Knicks were the better team here. They just could not overcome all the injuries. Now, were all those injuries a string of unfortunate circumstances or a shot in their own foot due to the coaching style of Tom Thibodeau? It's hard to say. A lot of them did seem like freak accidents, except probably the OG Anunoby hamstring injury. That was probably due to overexertion. But that injury and the Josh Hart injury were, in my opinion, the turning point of the series. Credit where it's due to the Indiana Pacers though, they did take care of business. But yeah, with OG Anunoby and Josh Hart healthy, the Knicks were able to take a closely fought Game 1 behind 92 combined points from the Villanova trio, and they were able to take Game 2 with OG Anunoby scoring 28 points in just 28 minutes before his injury. Even without another one of their starters, OG Anunoby, they were right in the thick of Game 3 in Indiana before Andrew Nembhard saved their season with a deep three-pointer as the shot clock expired. The Pacers and Knicks would then exchange home blowouts in Games 4 and 5 to make it a 3-2 series in favor of the Knicks. Game 6 started close, but Josh Hart suffered an abdominal injury early in the game. He tried to fight through it, but he wasn't that same X factor, that soul, no pun intended, that heart, that he was throughout this entire playoff run for the Knicks. And without Hart, Brunson struggled. At one point, he missed 11 straight shots in Game 6. And then in Game 7, it just looked like the Knicks didn't want to fight anymore. Donte DiVincenzo hit an NBA Game 7 record with 9 threes, but the Knicks' defense was non-existent. They allowed the Pacers to make an NBA playoff record 67% of their shots, and yeah, they hit over 50% of their threes too. To be fair to the Knicks, some of those were tough shots, but the Pacers were mostly getting exactly what they wanted. For the series, Jalen Brunson averaged 30 points and 6 assists on 46% shooting, but like I said, he did not come up big in Games 6 or Game 7 before he fractured his hand. Donte DiVincenzo had an amazing series, having several playoff career highs, and ended up averaging 23 points on 46% shooting from 3. But like I said, a big reason the Knicks lost was they didn't get the same contributions on the glass from Josh Hart and Isaiah Hartenstein. For the Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Haliburton had an up and down series. Some games he'd explode for 30 plus points on great shooting, and some games he would be extremely passive, not even looking at the rim in second halves. Pascal Siakam had a good series too, averaging 20 points and 6 rebounds on 53% shooting, and he was even better after OG Anunoby went down, because 6'4" Josh Hart was his primary defender. And he's a good defender, but that's just too big of a size advantage. One more guy to point out is TJ McConnell. He was a pest all series. He turned this series around with his Jose Alvarado-like steals, his ability to get into the defense for a short jumper, or passing to a roller. The Knicks should have a healthy Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, and Mitchell Robinson back next year. They should be a pretty deep team. They showed that this year with the contributions of Deuce McBride, Precious Achiuwa, and even Alec Burks in these playoffs. If Tibbs wants to play those guys 45 minutes a game in the playoffs, fine, but they will need to rest those guys a bit more in the regular season next year. The Knicks should be a top 4 team in the East again, and if they can stay healthy, they can make some noise. Also, I don't care how much it costs, re-sign OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein this offseason at any cost. For the Indiana Pacers, congrats on the Eastern Conference Finals. No hard feelings as a Knicks fan, but don't be offended when I say you guys just aren't on the Celtics level. To be fair, we weren't either, but you guys are the ones in the conference finals. Y'all should be happy about this season though no matter what, because you guys made the big Siakam trade, and you got an Eastern Conference Finals appearance to show for it. I guess we're going in reverse chronological order of clinching, since the Mavericks and the Thunder series is next. First of all, I have to say, no Thunder player or fan should hang their head low after this series. They were the #1 seed in the conference this year, and the youngest team ever to win a playoff series. They are still led by a 25-year-old superstar in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, an MVP caliber player, and their other important guys are a second-year player in J-Dub, a rookie in Chet Holmgren, young bench pieces in Cason Wallace, Jalen Williams, and Isaiah Joe. This team has a lot of talent, but as Sam Presti said, they wanted to see how these guys fared in a playoff run, and I think the Thunder learned a lot. They will have $30+ million in this offseason and several first-round picks to remedy these issues. And those issues are consistent bench minutes, size in the starting lineup, and most importantly, Josh Giddey. The Thunder won Game 1 with him in the starting lineup, but he was also a key reason they lost in Game 2. He was a -20 in just 11 minutes of playing time. He was getting targeted on defense and left completely open on the perimeter. He was not just a net zero for the Thunder, but he was actually a significant net negative. The other reason they lost that game too was the first of the PJ Washington games. In Game 2, he scored 29 points and hit 7 threes. The Mavericks traded for PJ Washington at the trade deadline for a two-way impact, but even they were probably surprised by this outburst. It also continued for the first 3 quarters of Game 3. He scored 27 points in those first 3 quarters, but in the fourth quarter he went cold. He couldn't score a single point. But hey, that's the reason you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and heck, even Derek Lively hit 5 of 8 free throws in that fourth quarter when the Thunder tried to employ the Hack-a-Lively strategy. For a majority of this series, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was getting his buckets. He averaged 32 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds, shooting 55% from the fields. He also averaged like 2.5 blocks, which is just insane for a guard. But besides Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the rest of the supporting cast was just inconsistent and couldn't get into their rhythms. It could have been the inexperience, but they were very likely affected by this new-look Mavericks team too. They're no longer a team focused on the heliocentric offense of Luka Doncic and the shot-making of Kyrie Irving. They are a versatile team with plenty of shooters, energy guys, and lengthy defenders. All of their new additions last offseason and this season's trade deadline addressed these issues. PJ Washington, like I said, had those breakout scoring games, averaging 18 points and 8 rebounds on 47% three-point shooting, but he was also playing great defense. Derrick Jones Jr. transformed from just a lob threat to a real scoring threat for this Mavericks team. He averaged about 19 points per game in the last 3 games of the series, including going 4 for 4 from 3 in the second half of their comeback Game 6 win. And Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively gave Chet Holmgren and the Thunder Bigs work all series, crashing the offensive and defensive glass. The Thunder's starting power forward and center, J-Dub and Chet, were only able to average a combined 33 points and 12 rebounds, even though they are the Thunder's second and third best players. And despite a passive series from Kyrie Irving, he only scored 16 points a night, and a few tough games for Luka Doncic, although he still averaged 25, 11, and 9 for the series, the Mavericks still controlled this series, and the Timberwolves should be terrified if the Mavericks can keep this up and get Kyrie Irving going a little bit more. And finally, for the least competitive of the 4 series, we have the Celtics and the Cavaliers. I don't think anyone really figured the Cavs would stand a chance, and a 5-game series is exactly what I expected. These Celtics are just so dangerous because they can have so many different guys kill you on any given night. In round 1, it was a lot of Derek White. In round 2, though, he was a little bit colder from the field, so Tatum and Brown just combined to average 50 points, 16 rebounds, and 9 assists per night. And an example of this is in Game 1. Jason Tatum only had 18 points on 7 for 19 shooting. That's their best player, and still, they won by 25. Most other teams and most other stars do not have that luxury, especially in the playoffs. For the Cavaliers, this was a weird series. They got that one game in Boston, where the Celtics just seemed disinterested in competing. The other 2 games with Spida, games 1 and 3, were not particularly close. Then Donovan Mitchell was out for games 4 and 5, and Darius Garland and Evan Mobley played a lot better, and the Cavaliers kept both of those games close. In the 3 games that Donovan Mitchell played, he averaged 32 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists on amazing shooting splits. But he just seemed to completely take over the Cavaliers' offense. not letting the other guys get their touches. In games 4 and 5, Garland and Mobley had a 30-point game. Garland in game 4 and Mobley in game 5. Garland's game was particularly surprising as he really struggled throughout most of the series, but Evan Mobley was consistently great. Hell, even Marcus Morris had a 25-point game in game 5, trying to save the Cavs season, but to no avail. The Cavaliers have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer this offseason. There were a lot of reports that came out about Garland's unhappiness with the role of Donovan Mitchell. There's obviously rumors about Donovan Mitchell potentially not re-signing too. It seems like the Cavaliers management was unhappy about Jared Allen's unwillingness to risk further injury to his rib by not attempting to play through it. It may be a mess of an offseason, but the talent is still there for Cleveland if they can figure it all out. On top of that, they didn't get the contributions they would have hoped for from Max Strus and Isaac Okoro in this series. Strus had like one good game where he hit like 5 threes, but besides that, he was not effective on the offensive or defensive end. And for the Boston Celtics, there's not much more to say about them. They have one of the most balanced starting fives ever, they have very few weaknesses on offense or defense, and they have their star players that can make tough shots when it's clutch time. They should easily make their way to the NBA Finals. On that note, let's officially talk about the conference finals. For the Eastern Conference, I think the Celtics will win in 5 games. They won their first 2 rounds in 5 games. I don't think Indiana is that much better than either of the 2 teams that they faced, so 5 games seems about right. The Pacers should win a game when they decide to shoot 60% from the field, no matter what shots they take, but they will have no answer on defense for the offensive juggernaut that is the Boston Celtics. Boston should cruise their way into the NBA Finals and finally face some real competition when they get there. For the Western Conference, coming out of the first round against the Clippers, I probably would not have chosen the Dallas Mavericks to be representing the West in the NBA Finals, but I saw some amazing things in that second round series against Oklahoma City. These Mavericks are not the Luka and Kyrie show anymore. The rotation of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively gives you 0 seconds of rest from a relentless pursuit of rebounds. PJ Washington is an actual third inside-out scoring option, and even Derek Jones Jr. averaged 20 points in the last 3 games of that series. Combine that with everyone, including Kyrie and Luka, putting their all into the defensive end, and it's a really hard team to beat. Obviously, the Timberwolves are no slouches either. They just defeated the reigning champions, who were looking poised to repeat after taking a 3-2 series lead in Denver, but they are also a team that just doesn't quit. Ant is not quite on the level of Luka yet, but this series could change that narrative. They lack a little bit of the offensive firepower that the Mavericks have, but they are even better on defense with their extreme length and shot blocking abilities. However, I trust the Mavericks supporting cast over the Timberwolves, and I think the Mavericks can end it on their home court in 6 games. But let me know what you guys think. Who do you think will win each of the conference finals matchups, and which team will be the 6th different team in 6 years to win the NBA Finals? Let me know in the comments below, and why not give the video a like if you liked the video. This is the Sports Ball Network, signing off. Peace.